Hit record. Fantastic. All right, we are talking about inventory management, and we are talking about best practices for inventory management. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And again, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat as we go along. All right. Inventory management. So inventory planning to win 2021. So after all of the craziness that went on with COVID and with the increase in restrictions in terms of Amazon restricting you from sending in inventory, became more and more important to realize that inventory management is an extremely important system to set up. So we have put together some best practices and discovered some best practices for inventory management. I'm going to go ahead and share those with you. And I'm going to also show you how we're doing that inside of Stocked. And if you are using a spreadsheet, there's certain things that some of them can be done in a spreadsheet. Some of them can't be done in a spreadsheet necessarily because the information that Amazon gives that you are able to download is very granular. But most of these things can be done in a spreadsheet as well. So depending on where you're at in your business, it might make sense to, move into a software that can help you with this, or it might make sense to continue to use the spreadsheets until you get to the point where it becomes too much and you need help with it, a software like Stocked. All right. So a little bit about me. I am Chelsea Cohen. I'm the co-founder of Stock.com. I have been selling on Amazon since 2014. And before that time, I had really started coming up in the Amazon space regarding copywriting. I have a copywriting agency and have specific techniques that I've been using for increasing conversions for Amazon sellers. So I was featured in the AMPM podcast, Seller Stories with Jungle Scout, the Amazing Summit, and I've spoken at many of these events and on many of these podcasts regarding copywriting. And I'm now going into the field of inventory management. And the way that all came about was really that I was just reading a question. Someone said, will this be recorded? Yes, this will be recorded. You can watch this later. But the way that it came about as in terms of me getting into the inventory space was that I have a background in accounting or in bookkeeping. And so numbers has always been something I've been very interested in. And I really like spreadsheets. And so I was starting to recognize that I was losing a lot of money in terms of inventory. I was over ordering and paying way too much in storage fees, paying way too much in loan fees, and also tying up a bunch of capital. So some products I was over ordering, some products I was stocking out, usually it was my best sellers that I was stocking out on. And so I really decided that I needed to figure out how to get better at inventory management because a lot of my profit was being eaten up by bad inventory management, by fees regarding inventory management. And so I decided to become an expert at it for my own business. In the process of becoming an expert at inventory management, it took a lot of time. So it was taking all this time. I was trying to find a system that I could use to, one, track my inventory, right? That question of where is my stuff, right? That's one of the questions. The two questions that are most popular are where is my stuff and then how much do I order, right? So it became really cumbersome to manage all of those things. And so I decided I needed to find a software. And in looking at softwares and asking around, asking the mastermind groups that I was in, everyone came up with the fact that there is no software that really does what we want it to do. So we go back to spreadsheets. I thought that was kind of silly. So I thought, well, if it can be done in a spreadsheet, it should be able to be done in a software. So I essentially then wanted to meet someone and find someone who could actually help me to build this software. I knew that it would, if we could figure it out, in our head, and if we could figure it out in a spreadsheet, we should be able to figure it out in a software. So I met Dan Fernandez, and Dan Fernandez is this guy. So I met this guy, and he is the founder of Thomason.com. And he was saying that he was, bored and he needed a new project. He wanted to build a software, but he needed to know, he needed something to do. And so I had just decided that I wanted to build a software for inventory management. He needed someone to work with on a project. And so we kind of connected up about 2.5 years ago and built Stockout. Stockout now is Stockout is essentially an inventory management software. We basically eat, sleep, and breathe inventory management. So for the past 2.5 years, we've talked to hundreds, literally hundreds of Amazon sellers about the problems in inventory management and done research, tested out a lot of the different systems and figured out what are the common denominators in terms of these people, sellers who are stocking out, what are common denominators with sellers that are over ordering, and how do we kind of start to dial that in and find some solutions for Amazon sellers to get better at inventory management. So that being said, I wanted to go ahead and jump into the 3 most common mistakes, and they all have several different solutions that you can build in as systems to your business, but they are the 3 most basic mistakes in inventory management, right? So we call them the common inventory mistakes. So the first one is under ordering, right? You're not ordering enough. You thought that you should have, that your order should be, say, oh, I order 3,000 every time, so I'm going to continue to order 3,000. And you don't really realize that you need to increase your order. Or perhaps you get bad data and you take bad data based on bad calculations and you come up short, right? Which, if you have a long lead time, can be a problem for you. So a common example would be looking at a seasonal period, right? And you say, okay, last year I sold 6,000 units during Christmas. However, if you're not tracking that you stocked out on that SKU for a week, maybe there's a lot going on and you forgot that you had stocked out. So you look, last year you forget, you could have sold 7,200 units, but you actually only sold 6,000 units. So this year for Christmas order, you say, okay, this is how much I sold. This is how much I'm going to place my order for again. Then you essentially set yourself up to make the same mistake twice, and you set yourself up to under order. So it's looking at the data in a way that is a little bit faulty. And so I'm going to teach you how to look at the data in a way that is more effective, and what we do inside of Stockout and the calculation that you should be using to estimate some of these orders. All right, another one is over ordering. Over ordering, so that is essentially, you've got, you think you need a certain amount, and then you find out that you order way too much. And one of the reasons that this is a problem is because you have excess storage fees, you tie up capital, right? If you're trying to scale your business and you're trying to launch new products and you're not able to because you can't free up enough capital, over ordering has a grave impact on your business because you're tying up that valuable cash that you want to invest in new products. You're tying it up in inventory that is just sitting and actually working against you by collecting fees, right? Over ordering and putting too much inventory into Amazon is also working against you by hurting your inventory performance index, right? That's the score that Amazon gives you on how good you are at inventory management. Amazon doesn't like to see you having too much inventory at their warehouse, and they'll penalize you for it. So over ordering has a couple of different negative impacts, which is why it's important to get it right and not to over order for those various reasons. All right, here's a common example of why someone might over order. So for example, last fall you sold 10,000 units. Perhaps you forgot that you had done a media special. Someone mentioned you on a morning news segment, for example. Great back to school, great for back to school. And so you got a ton of extra sales from that promotion that are not going to repeat themselves. So you might have had 3,000 units of extra inventory sold that next year you don't have that set up. It's not going to recur, or maybe it was a lightning deal, or it was an email campaign, or something that's not going to repeat itself. But if you're just taking the total number of units for that period of time and not factoring these things in, it can cause you problems such as this. Right? So you order 10,000 units, you don't have that same media feature, you only sell 7,000 units, and then you have 3,000 units of excess inventory sitting there. It could be thousands of dollars tied up in inventory, and then you start, incurring additional fees for that. All right, and then the last one is simply cutting it too close. This often happens because we have a million things going on, right? There are two reasons. One is we have a million things going on, and sometimes reordering is at the back of our mind, right? We know we have to do it, and we're gonna get to it, and we keep putting it off, and then we realize it's too late and we should have ordered last week, right? Cutting it too close. Then you have to airship something, or you stock out, and all of the cost involved with stocking out and re-ranking a product. The other reason people cut it too close, beyond just not having time, is the cash flow, right? Because you know how much money you're going to have to outlay for this inventory, you kind of sometimes start to put it off because you're waiting for your next payment to come in. And that's also tied into when you over order some of those slower moving products, that cash is then tied up, and it causes you to cut it too close on some of your best selling products because of the cash flow. And so it all ties in together, and it has kind of a perfect storm of causing you to have upsets in your inventory management. All right, so that's all of the mistakes. Now we're going to talk about inventory best practices. Okay, so to address the subject of under and over ordering, right? They're basically the same mistake. It's very similar mistakes. You're not looking at the data in a granular enough way. So one of the things that we suggest people to adopt is called adjusted velocity. So that works in that instead of using a total monthly sales, you're looking at what your daily adjusted velocity is, and you're adjusting for things like sales spikes and stockouts. So the way that would look inside of, for example, Stocked, the way that would look here is you've got this adjusted velocity. So you've got, you're looking at, say, a 30-day average. Let's say a 30-day average, if that's what we're looking at, and say we ran out of stock for 10 days out of those 30. What's going to happen is that the system is going to adjust that. It's going to only look at the in-stock days, right? So maybe this is an average of the 20 in-stock days. It's going to remove the out of stock. So that's what we mean by adjusted velocity. We're looking at the daily sales for all, in-stock days. And so you can look at the fact that we're pulling stockouts out of our equations, right? We're removing them. And we are additionally removing any sales spikes. So you can decide what a sales spike is and what is not a sales spike. For example, by including all data except for, let's say, maybe, October 14th. Because October 14th was Prime Day, and Prime Day is probably going to happen in July this year instead of in October. So we want to remove the October 14th Prime Day sales. So we can remove that one and leave everything else. But it's very important to be able to remove any of those anomalies that are not going to repeat themselves, right? So that's adjusted velocity. So once you have been able to establish your adjusted velocity, you want to make sure that you're actually factoring in all the right things, right? So you're using averages, not monthly total sales. You could also use last year's sales. So for example, if you want to look at a sales pattern, last year's sales pattern, you can do that as well. And so you can come into the system, for example, because sometimes looking at your averages, right, the last 60 or 90 days is not helpful for when you're trying to plan for Christmas. So if you're using last year's sales, you're able to do that and at the same time factor any potential stockouts. So we're plugging in any potential stockouts as well. We're placing all of every day of last year, we're placing that same number of sales for every day of this year. And so you can see that there's a sales pattern, and you can pick up these sales patterns, but the difference is that if we stocked out for 3 days in December, we're plugging that with the average of what we sold for the rest of that period. So that's what's very important, is that you can use last year's sales data, but you need to make sure that you're tracking those stockouts and you're filling in the gaps in those stockouts. All right. Okay, then you want to, of course, remove sales spikes, stockouts, even deep discounts, if anyone is doing deep discounts these days. And then the last thing that you can add is you could also add a growth trend. So if you're using last year's sales, but your business has grown 20% year over year, you can then plug in a growth trend. And that's something that SoStock allows as well. So it's something to keep in mind, whether using a spreadsheet or using a software, is that if you're using last year's sales, you also want to look at what your growth has been over that time so that you don't simply place the same order you did last year, but you should look at your growth trend, and you should also consider that you don't necessarily want to have a stagnant business. So you might want to increase and add additional growth on top of that. Say, I always want to grow 5 or 10% each year. And so your orders should be getting larger in some of your products, right? Some of them might be on the way out, right? Trends wise, and you might be phasing them out. But overall, you want your business to be growing, not shrinking. All right, then you have buffer stock. If there's one thing that you implement in this presentation, I would say buffer stock would be that thing. It's like a safety. It's like building a safety net, right? Or imagine driving you're driving your car and you've got that empty light that comes up. That's a warning so that you can get to the gas station so that you don't get stuck by the side of the road. Buffer stock is the same thing. It's like that empty light warning that tells you need to order before you hit 0. So the way that would work is that you would set a number of units or a number of days worth of stock that you want, and once you set that up, then you will always be ordering ahead of time. So the way that works out is, for example, there are a couple of things that I recommend, right? I recommend when you're using a buffer stock to set your buffer stock in number of days, right? You can do it in number of units. The problem with number of units, however, is that if your sales start to increase dramatically or decrease dramatically, if you've set, say, for example, 300 units, 300 units might be great if you're selling 10 units a day, but as your product increases and you start selling 30 units a day, what used to be a month's worth of inventory is now 10 days worth of inventory. So setting in units can be very restrictive. So instead, if we set it in 30 days worth of inventory, it's going to fluctuate based on our sales. So whenever you're looking at buffer stock, it's a good idea to set your buffer stock in number of days so that it fluctuates. Another good reason to have buffer stock in days is that you can come in and you can set the same buffer stock for every single product in your catalog. And it doesn't matter if a product sells 1 unit a day or 100 units a day. When you set it in days, the total buffer stock is going to be flexible and adjust itself to each of those products and their velocity. All right, so I'm going to share a couple of tips on buffer stock. There's some guidelines that we share, and one of these is a surprising guideline for some people and can be very valuable information for pretty much anyone selling FBA. So the buffer stock guidelines, one of them would be the longer the lead time or transfer time, the higher the buffer stock should be. So if you've got 90 days worth or if you've got a lead time of 90 days and it takes 90 days to get your inventory to actually arrive at Amazon from your supplier, it's probably a good idea to have a larger buffer stock than, say, if it takes 7 days, right? If you're locally sourcing. So the number of things that can go wrong means that you have a lot of different places that you could be slowed up. So you want to have more of a cushion to account for all of those things. Then, of course, we talked about setting buffer stock in days rather than units. You can also consider putting a buffer stock for FBA and a separate buffer stock for your warehouse. So you can say, I want 30 days worth of stock at Amazon at all times, no less than 30 days. And then at my warehouse, I want to have an extra 10 days, for example. So a total of 40 days worth of stock I want to have between FBA and my warehouse at all times. Now, this is the last one. This is the one that's kind of surprising for some people to learn, but you should consider having a higher buffer stock maybe than you might have thought before. And for FBA, I would say 30 days is probably a decent amount for private label sellers. It's a little bit different for wholesale, but the thing that you want to factor in is that you need to stay in stock at all times. You want to make sure that your listing doesn't, stock out. That's obvious. But when your listing starts to get low on inventory, Amazon starts to, its algorithm starts to make decisions based on that, right? Amazon's #1 goal is to make the customer happy. And their promise to the customer is 2-day Prime, or sometimes, they have 1-day Prime. And so that's their agreement with the customer. So if you don't have a lot of stock, Amazon has a hard time of spreading it across the country. If it has a hard time spreading it across the country, what is going to happen is that you're going to start to be low on stock or not have stock in certain parts of the country. So what Amazon then starts to do, its algorithm considers this. And if you're bidding for, say, a certain keyword, and so is your competitor, it might give that ad to your competitor because your competitor has plenty of inventory in that part of the country and you maybe have 0. If Amazon can't fulfill that 2-day Prime, they're not going to want to present you as the best option. So it could affect your ads. They could start moving you down the ranking in that particular area, something called geo ranking, right? Geo having to do with geography or location. So there are parts of the algorithm are doing this. So if you want to make sure that you have enough dispersal of inventory across the country, and a good rule of thumb is usually about 30 days, right? That can be different for wholesalers. So if you are a wholesaler, you have other sellers that are also selling that product. So you can consider that you're not going to have too many problems in terms of losing ranking, right? Because you're not going to stock out of inventory necessarily on that listing. So the listing doesn't have to be re-ranked, but you could lose out on sales in a similar way. It's just something to keep in mind. All right, now we're going to talk about MinMax Restocking. So this has to do with buffer stock as well, but it's a little bit more detailed than that. MinMax Restocking is actually something that I learned about when I went and toured a warehouse. So I toured a warehouse. They are a print-on-demand book company, as well as they do have some books that they stored, but the things that they were doing with what's called MinMax Restocking, they had a ton of paper and they had a ton of ink so that they could print on demand. And the ink and the paper were on these weighted systems. And once it got to a certain low weight, they would then restock up to a maximum weight. And then they would use the paper or the ink down to that the low minimum weight, and then would stock it up to the maximum. So MinMax Restocking works the same way, and we've set this up in SoStocked, and it's something that I recommend setting up for your own system. One of the reasons I recommend setting it up is because you always need a system. And so if you feel like you can't pass the inventory task over to a VA because you're doing it by gut feel, or you're doing it by what, oh, I have to look at the numbers and I have to think with it and I have to figure it out, and you have to kind of do it, by guessing, you're never going to get rid of that task, especially if you hate inventory management and you don't like numbers and you really like the marketing side of things. If you want to get rid of that task, adopting a system like MinMax Restocking is extremely valuable for you. So if you're trying to get rid of this task, that's the first thing to do. It's kind of like the McDonald's effect, right? Someone who comes to McDonald's, they know that they press this button, that means you're going to have a Big Mac, and the Big Mac is made like this, and it's just over and over and over again. It's the same thing. It's the same system, so that it can be easily taught to somebody else. So creating a system like MinMax Restocking will help you with outsourcing your inventory management to some of your VAs. So I'm going to show you how MinMax Restocking works. Okay, so we're back in our I'm in the transfer schedule, and this is to determine how much to transfer into Amazon and how often. Okay, so we have a feature that we call as needed that activates your MinMax restocking. So we talked about buffer stock, right? Having no less than 30 days worth of stock, for example. All we would do then is to plug in a maximum stock, right? So that's like us, with the paper or with the ink setting, the low weight and the high weight, only we're doing it in days worth of inventory. So you would, in this scenario, 30 days of buffer stock or minimum and 90 days of maximum. What you would be doing then would be you'd send in 90 days worth of inventory, you'd sell through to 30 days, then you'd stock back up to 90 days, and you're always staying within that range. And whatever the numbers are for you, but it's going to be, what you want to keep fees down and to keep your stock up and to create a system so that you can pass this on to somebody else. The last thing that I wanted to touch on with the max stock is that sometimes your max stock is going to be your limit, your restock limit, right? So we're pulling this data on a daily basis from Amazon. So as Amazon updates your restock limits, we are going to pull that information, and we're going to allow you to send only your maximum. So it's whatever is greater. So if your maximum stock here is 90 days worth of inventory, 90 days is less than the 125 days that Amazon is allowing this product. So we're going to go for 90 days. If, for example, though, we set this at 150 days and we only have 125 that Amazon allows us to send, we're going to tell you to send the 125 days worth of inventory. So not that I'm advising you to send 125 days of inventory necessarily, but that's just how the system works, is that it's going to pick whatever is less, but it's going to pull your actual restock limit and give you that as an option. So, and there is a way to find this information if you're not using SoStocked. You can log into the fulfillment reports, right? You want to go into a reports, fulfillment, and then it's restock report. So you want to download your restock report, and you should have all those numbers. All right, so so the benefits of MinMax restocking, you're optimizing your inventory levels. With the minimum stock, you're reducing your stock outs. You're reducing high storage fees because you're setting that maximum and you're not going over it. And then again, you're systemizing so that you can delegate this task to somebody else. All right, inventory timeline. Okay, so I consider this as a game changer. This is something that helps you to visualize things, especially if you're not a numbers heavy person or you have a hard time understanding why the numbers are showing up as they are, or why you keep stocking out. Putting a timeline together of every single SKU becomes extremely helpful in being able to visualize why you might be stocking out or why you might need to place the size of the order that you have to place. So I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so this is our inventory timeline. This shows on a daily basis what is going to happen with your product, right? It's going to show the warehouse inventory. It's going to show anything that is arriving to the warehouse. It's going to show your FBA inventory, and it includes the reserve amount because this is the inventory that is being moved from one warehouse to the other. Like Amazon is moving the inventory. Maybe they checked it in at one location and then they have to disperse it throughout the country. Anything that's arriving will show up here. Anything that you're transferring from your warehouse into Amazon, and then any potential sales that you have. So if you've got, for example, you need to program some sales in, and I'll talk about that in a second. You should be planning out your sales, and you can see everything that's occurring, and you can see if there is going to be a stock out. I think we have one that we can show you here. If there is going to be a stock out, you'll be able to see that as well. So you can see here, there's a potential stock out for this particular product, and that needs to be accounted for. All right. Right, so you're able to track your changes over time. You can visualize the patterns, foresee stock outs. You can know what orders and transfers you need to place, and then have a daily inventory count for every single SKU, right? So it helps you just visualize things. It's really been helpful for us. And if you're having a hard time understanding why you're stocking out on a particular SKU, I guarantee, or I recommend you put something like that together. Might give you a little bit of insight. Simultaneous forecasting. Okay, so what we're doing when we are doing this forecasting is we're doing what's called simultaneous forecasting. It's actually, if you have a warehouse, you actually need two forecasts. You need a forecast of how much to order, and you need a forecast of how much to transfer, right? So if you are factoring this in, that's something that you should be doing. Your lead time for your orders is going to be very different than your lead time for transfers. So you actually need to figure out both of those at the same time. And so we just refer to that as simultaneous forecasting. So that's just something to keep in mind. And if you've got a system already for your orders, it would make sense to put a similar system together for your transfers. Forecast modeling. So I want to talk a little bit about what our philosophy is in terms of inventory management. So there is this idea that you can have a perfect algorithm and that will be able to tell you exactly what you need to order. We haven't found that to be true at all. Sometimes you'll have an algorithm that a system puts together, a software puts together, and the algorithm works really well for, say, your best sellers, but then it doesn't really work very well for, say, your slow sellers. And that's the reason that a lot of people have been trying inventory management systems, trying softwares, and going back to spreadsheets. Even 7- and 8-figure sellers are using spreadsheets, and it's because there is no perfect algorithm, and there is the science side of things, right? That's the algorithm side of things. There's the data, taking past data, and then and trying to estimate based on past data, what am I going to need to order in the future? That's the science. The art is everything that you know about your business. And so we've always been built on the belief that you know more about your business than an algorithm does. And that's where forecast modeling comes into play. Whatever system you're using, you should be allowed to put your marketing plans into that system. You should be allowed to put your seasonality into that system. Anything that you know is going to come up in the future, any planning that you have, right? Instead of marketing on a whim and doing these things on a whim, if you are putting those into your inventory plans, you can be ahead of the curve in terms of that you actually order the inventory that you need for those particular sales. So that's something that we call forecast modeling. You're able to plug in the data and see what's going to happen to your inventory. So you can see, okay, let's take all of these SKUs and we're going to do some sales on all of these SKUs. If you plug that into the system, it might be great for, say, most of them, but maybe 2 of the SKUs are actually about to stock out. Or if you don't place an order, they're going to stock out. So you can decide that you are going to do an aggressive, aggressive PPC campaign for some of those SKUs, but the other SKUs are going to hold off on. And that's something that hasn't been being done recently, is that the inventory team and the marketing team are not talking together. So that's what forecast modeling is all about, is being able to make those 2 things communicate together and work together. And so you can actually see what would happen if. It helps you to play out the scenario of what would happen if. And that's what modeling is really all about. So that's something that we built into the system, and it helps you to plan out your future inventory orders. All right, so we touch on it a little bit. There's something we call sync to scale, and that is, the adding your marketing, inventory, and cash flow as a solid machine and making it work together. All right, I see we have a question. I wanted to make sure that this question is answered. If it's not real, can you set up a different minimum order quantity for a supplier with several different ASINs? Yes, so every single ASIN can have its own minimum order quantity. So you can set, if you've got, say, for example, one supplier and they have 5 different ASINs, you could have 5 different minimum order quantity. So it's not on a per supplier level, it's on a per ASIN level. All right, good question. Okay, so sync to scale. So syncing meaning to match them up, to sync them up. I have talked to a lot of sellers. I've talked to PPC agencies. I've talked to inventory managers, and there is a general disconnect between the marketing and the inventory. And when you talk to inventory managers about the subject of marketing, and marketing not telling them in advance when they're going to run a sale, there's a little bit of nervous laughter because they know that if they could just get the information ahead of time, they could do their job better. But it's kind of this thing of, you know, the marketing team or the marketing side of the business doesn't tend to tell the inventory team what's going on and vet the inventory against the marketing plans. And so once you get into that issue of causing a stock out, that then upsets your cash flow because you run out of inventory, you have to do the expensive air shipments, you have to pay to re-rank, all of these things, then you have less money to market, you have less money to invest in products, and it all affects, it's like this ecosystem. And so if there's if the balance is off in this perfect system, then it's going to, one piece is going to upset the other pieces and it's all going to come crashing down. So you have to get a really good system. You have to really sync that if you really want to scale and get your money moving properly to be able to launch new products, right? Because we all talk about scaling and we all know the problem is cash flow, but we don't really connect cash flow problems to inventory problems, and we don't connect inventory problems to marketing miscommunications or lack of communication. So really, if you're trying to scale, you need to start looking at this as an entire system and see in what places are you falling down maybe in your coordination. All right. So I often say that a good marketing plan can turn bad fast when it's so successful that it causes stockouts. So one of the things that we do, and I recommend this, you know, like I said, if you are using a spreadsheet system, there should be a place where you can enter some of your marketing data. But what you would need to do is actually plug this information in. So I showed it briefly. We have sections where you can add, where you can pull the trend, right? We talked about trends earlier. We have sections where you can add additional growth. This tool is really good for, say, you know, if you're going to launch a PPC campaign, you want to see what happens if you immediately launch the campaign and you start selling 5% more, 10% more, you know, 20% more. What's going to happen to your inventory? Will you still have stock, right? And you can apply this to all of your products. You can even apply this to particular products that you put a tag on. You know, say you've got a marketing tag. This will all apply that setting to all products with that particular tag. And then you have lightning deals. This is where you can set a specific date range and a number of units you're going to move for that date range. It doesn't have to be a lightning deal. It could be an email campaign. It could be, you know, working with an influencer. Anything that you plan to do where you plan to move a specific number of units should go into your planning so that you can see if you can actually afford that, right? I'll tell you a couple of true stories of sellers, seasoned sellers that have made the mistake of marketing in a bubble, right? Or in a vacuum. Seasonal spikes as well. This is similar to the lightning deals feature, but this allows you to add an increase based on a percentage, right? You can also add a decrease based on a percentage. So it's going to take your adjusted velocity and then add a percentage on top of that. And so you can see how they appear here, right? Here's the lightning deal one that we set up. And then down here is the other spike that we set up. You can start to visualize this, and this is going to affect the numbers that you're given in terms of how much you need to order and how much you need to transfer. All right, so I wanted to jump over into my slides again and talk about some of the common stockout mistakes, right? A lot of common stockout marketing mistakes, and that you really should be getting your marketing team to communicate to your inventory team and your inventory team to communicate to marketing. So here's just a couple of mistakes. I've talked to a lot of PPC agencies and asked them, you know, straight up, have you ever stocked out a client? You know, if it has your, oh yeah, our marketing, when we turn on our marketing, it's really great. And then, but they don't ever talk to them about inventory. So one of the jobs of, getting into inventory or into PPC campaigns is you should look at the inventory and how would the inventory be affected. So if you're working with an agency and they don't ask you that question, you should bring it up because it's important, right? It doesn't make sense to spend all of this money on advertisements to get your product ranking only to have it stock out, right? You're spending a lot of money. You're paying Amazon for those ads. You're paying your ad company for those ads or for their services. And then you're stocking out, right? It ends up costing you a lot of money because it's not only the stock out, the air shipments, the re-ranking cost, it's all the money that you spent to Amazon and your ad company to push you into a stock out. So that's a lot of money that's wasted. And so your profit starts getting eaten up by not having that communication between the two areas in your business. Discount coupon emails, that's one of them. A lot of times we'll look at, oh, a holiday is coming up. We should do a holiday sale. Let's do an email campaign, So let's do Mother's Day. We did a Mother's Day 20% off. Let's do a 20% off coupon. Send it out on our email list. It goes really, really well. Stocking out next month. 20% off coupons. You could have not done any of those 20% off coupons, done full price sales and saved yourself from a stock out, but instead you did this sale without looking at your inventory. So these are true stories of seasoned sellers, 7 and 8 figure sellers that are making these types of mistakes. So it's extremely important to really understand the consequences of marketing without really looking at how it's going to affect your inventory. And that's where your inventory timeline comes in. Again, is plugging these things in, helps you to visualize these and see these before they become problems. Listing optimization is another one. If you change something in your listing or you change the price, change the images, change the copy, if it doubles your conversion, for example, great, but not so great if it doubles your conversion right into a stock out, right? So vetting your inventory before implementing your marketing strategies can prevent all of these things from happening. Okay, so I like to say in an inventory-based business, when you're out of inventory, you're out of business. So it's really important to understand how much inventory you have, right? Where is all your stuff and how do you keep track of it? So there are several different parts to keeping track of inventory. You've got your available inventory, your reserved inventory minus the customer orders, right? You have inbound to Amazon, and then you have all of your warehouse stuff, your warehouse inventory, anything that's currently on the way to your warehouse, and then anything that's currently in production. So if any of these numbers are missing, you can get into miscalculating your inventory, right? And there are some systems that where the reserve inventory completely disappears from the equation until it's fully checked in, and that can become a major problem. So if you are using a different system, you want to make sure that the reserve is being accounted for. So there are a couple of different ways that you can set up looking at your inventory. You've got the inventory page, right? So you could set up a system like this where you're tracking everything. You've got your available stock, your reserve stock. You've got anything that's inbound to FBA, and then all of your warehouse stock, and then anything that's inbound to your warehouse. And the inbound includes anything in production. So you can see all of your stuff that's in production, your inbound shipments that are all in production here. And then the final way to look at it, a Kanban view is very helpful. And so if you are, have the ability to create a Kanban view, or if you're using SoStocked, it'll show you everything in production, anything en route, right? How is it traveling? When is it going to arrive? What's the ETA? And then anything that is arriving to, say, your third-party warehouse or arriving to Amazon. So having a full visual of all stages of your inventory is extremely important. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to jump into was simply what I call the seller stock out cycle. This is getting a little bit better now, but it's still a little bit rough, right? And the seller stock out cycle is, Amazon takes weeks to check in our shipments. We stock out while waiting for Amazon to check the shipments in. 30 days of sales are lower due to the stock out. And so our restock limit is then decreased because we had this stock out issue, right? That was sort of Amazon created. So there's this, you get into this dwindling spiral of your restock limits continue to go lower and lower and lower based on these problems. So I did want to talk about what you can do to overcome this. So basically, it's just to have a backup plan. And I'll explain to you why that actually helps to safeguard your restock limits. Amazon doesn't want to they don't want to be a storage facility. They want to be a distribution center. And so they've created these guidelines to sort of force us to create our own storage facilities. And so that's one of the things that I recommend is one, to have your own backup storage facility, and then also to not have Amazon be your only distribution channel, right? They could be your only sales channel, but they shouldn't be your only distribution channel. And so what I mean is that if Amazon decides not to check your inventory in, then a lot of the time we're left not making sales, right? So that happens very, very often. And we actually, way back in 2015, we had a problem where we sent all of our inventory to Amazon right before Christmas. Amazon did not check it in until after Christmas. So we lost out on all of our Christmas sales for a particular product because we sent everything we had and they lost it, or really decided not to check it in until after Christmas because we had missed the deadline. So that is an example of Amazon being our only distribution center and us putting all our eggs in the Amazon basket. We could have made FBM sales with Amazon if we had kept some of that inventory. So setting up your own warehouse that can do fulfillment, even if you never use it, you want to have that option and not send everything to Amazon at all times. And really, it's like you're handcuffing yourself to Amazon's, poor decisions or poor distribution problems, right? You adopt Amazon's problems. And so this is just one of those ways to stop adopting all of Amazon's problems, right? We do have a lot of them that we're going to not be able to get rid of, but we can at least get rid of the not being able to fulfill our own sales, because you can take sales on Amazon and you can fulfill them yourself if you have a fulfillment center. And I will give you, if in the follow-up email, since you guys have stayed through this presentation, I will give you a link to some of the resources that we have collected, community sourced resources for fulfillment centers and for storage facilities, third-party warehouses. And so basically the whole idea is that if you're able to collect, even though you stock out at FBA, if you still create FBM sales and are able to fulfill those FBM sales, your restock limit will not drop, right? Whatever the sales you are able to maintain with FBM, those are still counted in your restock limits. So Amazon is not going to penalize you for being out of stock at FBA if you're still able to fulfill sales through FBM. So that's something to keep in mind, is that Amazon is looking at your sales, right? Your total sales. They're looking at your FBA sales and your FBM sales, and your restock limits are based on total sales on Amazon. So that's something good to know. All right. All right, so we are getting to the end of it. So essentially, if you're putting together a solution, you want something that removes sales spikes. You want to be able to remove stockouts, factor lightning deals and other sales into the equation, project seasonality, track orders and transfers, get reorder alerts, right? If you are using your own system, I would say getting reorder alerts might be, something like putting an alarm in your phone or in your calendar. And then finally, managing your FBA, third-party inventory, and any purchase orders or on-order inventory, right? You should be tracking all of that. All right, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, sostock.com is the name of our company, our website. We're currently offering a lifetime deal, a lifetime discount of $79 per month. Probably in the next couple of months, this is going to be increased to a tiered structure. So the tiered structure means that we're going to look at how many orders you're making, and we'll be pricing you based on the size of your business, right? The number of orders. We might also make some features more exclusive. And so the pricing structure is going to change later this year. But right now, $79 for life means it doesn't matter how big your business grows, doesn't matter how many features we release, you get it all. You get it all for that price. It's locked in, and it will never change for as long as you keep the account. All right. Any questions? Do we have any questions? I know it's like drinking from a fire hose, but let me know if you have any questions. I don't see any showing up. Maybe, hopefully that's a good thing. Okay, great, fantastic. So last thing I'll say is that we have webinars. We have a webinar series. We've been sharing this webinar series, or this particular webinar, for a while. We're going to be bringing back special guests once a month. So we'll be doing an inventory webinar on a monthly basis, just like similar to what you've experienced here. But then we're going to also be bringing back our other series where we will be hosting people on the webinars, right? One of the upcoming ones that we're going to be putting together will be all about exiting and how to increase the value of your company, right, over time, and strategically position yourself so that you can get the most money for your business when you end up selling. All right, if you have any questions, you can reach out at stock@sostocked.com. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Thank you guys so much for coming. I will be sharing the replay, and I will be sharing that resource that I mentioned to you about having third-party warehouses, fulfillment centers. And if you have any other questions later on, go ahead and hit me up. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye.